6-2. That is what we gave you in round one against the spread and on the over-under line. It ended up being the final game of the first round, Tennessee at Ohio State, that spoiled the perfect record. Got both of those wrong, but we move on. I think round two is going to be more difficult to pick. Looking at these games, I have a lot less confidence in comparison to the first round games. I am interested to see how these games play out with the neutral sites now in play. I mean, these things are all at, neutral venues with the bowl games. So a lot of what you saw in round one, especially with, the cold weather, these games being played on a team's home field, I think that dynamic obviously will change with this round two. First round ended up being chalk. All the home teams won, and they all covered the spread. We have two double-digit spreads now in the quarterfinals. Recording this in the afternoon leading up to the Penn State-Boise State game, the Fiesta Bowl. So Penn State, Boise State is at 12.5. I actually think that line has moved. I thought when I checked in on it earlier this week, it was either 10 or 10.5. So that would imply, maybe some sharps jumping on the Nittany Lions, pushing that thing up. And then the Peach Bowl with Texas and Arizona State, that is also currently sitting at 12.5. I think we have a good chance for at least one of those to be closer than the spread would indicate. I'm not saying we are going to see an outright upset, but I do think when you look at those, those are more likely to be compelling than maybe you would typically assume in a game where the line is that big. I am excited to see the rematch between Ohio State and Oregon. I think it's cool that this just so happens to be the Rose Bowl, right? What are the odds in the first year of the expanded playoff and also with the conference movement, right? This is Oregon's first year in the Big Ten, that you would end up with call it a traditional Rose Bowl matchup, right? I mean, I think Oregon and Ohio State have played in Rose Bowls, I want to say at least one time in maybe the last decade. Maybe they've met more than that, but just kind of ironic that that's what we end up getting, right? I would say, between Georgia, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, Oregon, right? I mean, what a matchup to get in Pasadena. There's also the Chip Kelly revenge game element, which I'll be honest, I had completely forgotten about earlier this season in the first matchup. Chip Kelly is the high-paid offensive coordinator for Ohio State. He was the head coach at Oregon for a number of years before moving on to the NFL. He became the Eagles coach. He spent a year with the Niners. And most recently, he was UCLA's offensive coordinator. Notre Dame, Georgia is intriguing. I think Notre Dame has the size and the physicality to make this competitive. I still give Georgia the edge on overall team speed, but I think this is going to be a slugfest. This is not that Notre Dame team from 10, 12 years ago that got absolutely smoked against Alabama in the BCS title game. I mean, that was a joke. They didn't belong on the same field as Alabama in that one. This team is the opposite, right? These guys can bang. If you can run the ball on offense and stop the run on defense, and you have the talent up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage, which clearly they do, then you can play with any team in this tournament. Forget the rankings. I think this is going to be, of all of the games, I think this has the best chance at being, kind of the who wins the battle up front, and ultimately that team will, be the winner. Now, Georgia, I think it's a huge spot for both teams, but I think the opportunity for Notre Dame is massive. If Notre Dame wins this game, regardless of whether they go on to win the national title or not, this immediately becomes Marcus Freeman's signature win at Notre Dame, and they are riding high into next season. Now, provided, right, they don't get blown out by, if they end up playing against Penn State in the next round. But if they win, I think this is huge for the program. I don't know much about Gunnar Stockton, but I am going to take the easy odds of this is most likely not a Tua taking over for Jalen Hurts type of situation where, if you remember that game a number of years ago, Tua basically comes in the second half and leads Alabama to victory over Georgia, coincidentally. But it also doesn't have to be, right? I mean, if Stockton just manages the game and doesn't make crucial mistakes, this game should be close. I mean, Georgia losing Carson Beck does not somehow remove all of the other talent that they have. And this roster is oozing with talent. So I look for this game to be, I should say Georgia and Notre Dame and Ohio State, Oregon. I think those are going to be the ones that, hopefully they deliver. We had, if you remember last year on New Year's Day, that was the two semifinal games, and both of those ended up being really good. So hopefully we get, at least that with these two games where they're basically a pick 'em. Running short on time here, we'll hop in. I actually heard a lot of really good ideas over the last week or so about, the format of the playoff, or, what they should do. This should be the rule, or, some of it I thought, hey, people have a point. Other stuff was just nonsense, but I think we could use a whole episode just kind of talking through some of the different scenarios of where the playoff, could end up going. Still think we are, or I should say it's inevitable, that 16 teams will be the field sooner than later, but we'll get to that on another episode. So real quick, we'll run through the picks for the 4 quarterfinal games. Start with Penn State, Boise State later today. Penn State minus 12.5 and the under at 54.5. And then the 3 games in order on New Year's Day. Texas at Arizona State. Take Texas minus 12.5 and the over 51.5. Ohio State, Oregon. I got the Buckeyes at minus 2.5 and the game total going over 55.5. And then Notre Dame, Georgia. Basically a pick 'em with Georgia minus 1. But going to take the Bulldogs here. I think it's going to be competitive. The line obviously indicates that. But I like Georgia just for that element of team speed that I mentioned before. So take the Dogs minus 1 and the game total over 45.5. Enjoy the games. Everyone have a safe New Year's. We'll talk soon.